I talk about Bitcoin a lot. A certain event in Canada actually made me way more vocal about Bitcoin than I was before. If you know, you know. But on this channel, we don't talk about Bitcoin too often. Only once in a while I mention it, and I often talk about it as part of my investment portfolio. However, people ask me about it all the time. The most common question they ask is, how do you buy Bitcoin? Where do you buy Bitcoin? Or where do you hold Bitcoin? These kind of questions often stem from the fact that they do not know what they're talking about and they don't even know where to start. So, before I start talking about how to invest in Bitcoin, I really want to urge you to actually study Bitcoin. Spend some time understanding Bitcoin, what it is, how it works, and why it's valuable. Then see if you believe in it. At its core, there are two things: code and belief. Once you study Bitcoin properly, you will understand whether it belongs in your investment portfolio or not. This video is not about that. This video is about how you can invest in Bitcoin in Canada. I'll cover 5 different ways that you can do so. Let's begin. Before we start talking about different ways to invest in Bitcoin, you need to understand something. Bitcoin is still a nascent asset class and it comes with its own risks. Owning Bitcoin can be a roller coaster ride because of all the volatility that comes with it. And finally, as usual, nothing in this video is financial advice, so do your own research before buying into this asset class. Anyway, let's get to different ways to buy Bitcoin, starting with the OG method, that is buying real Bitcoin. The first and the most direct way to invest in Bitcoin is to actually hold the actual asset. In Canada, you can do this through many different exchanges like Coinbase, Crypto.com, or Canada-specific platforms like JakePay and Newton. Personally, I use Coinbase after having experimented with a lot of different exchanges in Canada. I'll probably make a different video about this. One more point that I want to make is that I'm often surprised by people not knowing that you don't need to buy one Bitcoin. One Bitcoin is actually quite expensive, as you can see. You can actually buy a portion of a Bitcoin. These are known as sats. You can basically start investing in Bitcoin with just $1 if you want to. Let's get to some of the pros and cons of this method. First, you have direct ownership. You own actual Bitcoin, giving you full control. There's no middleman. No one else manages your Bitcoin for you. You are fully in charge. You're basically adhering to the true principles of Bitcoin. You're buying and holding it the way it was meant to be. On the other side, there are definitely some security concerns. You'll need a secure digital wallet and must protect your private keys at all times. There's also some technical knowledge required. Managing wallets and understanding blockchain basics can be intimidating for some beginners. Again, I want to urge you to actually spend some time understanding all of this, because if you really want to hold Bitcoin and use it the way it was meant to be, this is the only way you should be buying Bitcoin. At least that's what I recommend to people. But if you don't want to go through all this hassle, don't want to understand what private keys are, what really happens on the blockchain, you have a simpler alternative, and that is to buy Bitcoin ETFs. Bitcoin ETFs are a great option for people who only want to make money in terms of dollars and don't really care about what Bitcoin is and what it stands for. If you just want exposure to the price action, this is a really good way to do it. This is basically like a gold ETF tracking the price of gold without you actually having to buy the physical gold. These funds track Bitcoin's price without requiring you to own the actual asset directly. You must have heard a lot about Bitcoin ETFs last year because US finally got its own Bitcoin ETFs. There were several Bitcoin ETFs launched at the same time. However, Canada was actually quite ahead in this, and we have had Bitcoin ETFs for a long time now. Here are some examples. The Purpose Bitcoin ETF was the first ever Bitcoin ETF globally, and it started in Canada. Then we also have another popular choice for Canadians, that is the CI Galaxy Bitcoin ETF. And finally, we also have a low cost option with tax advantages, and that is Fidelity Advantage Bitcoin ETF. On the US side, you also have several options, starting with iShares Bitcoin Trust ETF. This one's a top choice from BlackRock and is the most popular one. Then you also have one of the oldest and largest crypto funds, which used to be a trust and was converted into an ETF, that is the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. As you'll see in the US, there's several different options and you can actually do a deep dive into them using any of these different sites. But let's look at some of the pros and cons of holding these ETFs. The first is that buying ETFs through your regular brokerage is very easy. You don't need any wallets and you can start investing in it right away. You can also get tax advantages. In Canada, you can hold these ETFs in your TFSAs, RRSPs, or FHSAs. And finally, your investment is being handled by experts. On the other hand, these ETFs come with management fees that can eat into your returns. You also have no direct ownership. You don't actually own Bitcoin, you own shares in a fund. There can also be some tracking errors. ETFs may not perfectly mirror Bitcoin's price movements, especially because it's so volatile. And finally, you can only trade these ETFs when the market is open, unlike Bitcoin, which trades 24/7. If you want to summarize, owning a Bitcoin ETF is basically like owning any other ETF. The next 3 ways of getting exposure to Bitcoin is actually very easy to do. However, However, I'd urge you to actually understand what you're getting into. Starting with Bitcoin mining stocks, the digital gold rush. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, hit like and consider subscribing, and tell me in the comments, are you already invested in Bitcoin? If so, what method are you using? So another way to invest in Bitcoin is to actually invest in the companies that mine it professionally. Back in the day, anybody could mine Bitcoin with a laptop. However, as it started getting more and more expensive, the equipment to mine Bitcoin got more expensive as well. And now it's mostly done by professional mining companies. These firms use powerful hardware to validate transactions on the blockchain and earn Bitcoin as rewards. As a business, this is not actually very hard to understand. However, you really need to understand how Bitcoin works and what these companies are actually doing. It's also a very cutthroat industry. I've actually seen a lot of mining stocks go to zero as well. Let's look at some examples. One of Canada's largest miner is actually Hut 8 Mining. Then you also have Bitfarms that operates mining facilities across North and South America. One more example is Hive Digital Technologies. They focus a lot on green energy powered mining. On the US side, you also have several miners. A major player with massive mining capacity is Marathon Digital Holdings. Then we also have Riot Platforms. They have actually diversified into hosting services for other miners as well. And one that is expanding rapidly with industry scale operations is Cypher Mining. There's also one more company called CleanSpark, and this is the one that I hold. There are several mining companies across US and Canada, but one thing that you must understand about these mining stocks is that they're more volatile than actual Bitcoin. Let's look at some of the pros and cons. Firstly, there's a high growth potential. Mining stocks often outperform Bitcoin during bull markets. They're also very easy to access. You can trade these stocks through your traditional brokerage accounts. Then you also have dual benefit. You benefit from both company performance and rising Bitcoin price. On the other hand, as I said, this industry is quite cutthroat, so you have company specific risks. Factors like energy costs and equipment failure can hurt profits quite quickly. There's a lot of volatility as well. Mining stocks are actually more volatile than Bitcoin itself. There are also some regulatory risks. Federal and state governments could impose stricter rules on these mining companies at any point. As a general rule of thumb, you don't start investing in Bitcoin by first investing into the mining companies. You actually go out and buy Bitcoin itself. Buying mining stocks actually come with massive risks, and you should do a lot of research before you ever buy a mining stock. Now, as you understand, buying Bitcoin mining stocks is basically buying stocks in the market. However, if you don't want to invest in mining stocks, there's also another category that you can invest in, and that is buying Bitcoin loving companies. Some companies don't mine Bitcoin but hold large amounts of it or build products for its ecosystem. Investing in these companies basically gives you indirect exposure to Bitcoin. Here are some examples. The most popular one that holds over 150,000 Bitcoin as part of its corporate strategy is MicroStrategy. In my opinion, MicroStrategy used to be a business, but now it's just a proxy for Bitcoin. Michael Saylor has basically become the poster child for Bitcoin at this point. Then you also have companies like Block, formerly known as Square. It develops payment solutions centered around Bitcoin. The price of MicroStrategy at this point is basically tied to Bitcoin. But on the other hand, companies like Block have a huge business and they do other things as well. Then there are also some companies, very few of them right now, that hold Bitcoin as part of their treasury strategy. So when you invest in any of these companies, you get a tiny exposure to Bitcoin as well. Some of the pros and cons of this method. Firstly, you have diversified exposure. These companies generate revenue from other sources too. Then there's also dual growth potential, benefit from both their core business successes and rising Bitcoin prices. Then you also have easier access. You can buy these from any stock exchange. On the other hand, investing like this is not purely tied to Bitcoin. Their stock prices depend on more than just Bitcoin performance, so you have to watch out for a lot more things. Then there's also overvaluation risks. Some companies may be overhyped due to Bitcoin involvement. Finally, there could be some regulatory scrutiny. Governments may target companies heavily invested in Bitcoin, so watch out for that as well. But hopefully soon we'll have a lot more regulatory clarity around this. The last method to get exposure to Bitcoin is to actually invest in cryptocurrency exchanges. You can invest in publicly traded cryptocurrency exchanges to get exposure to Bitcoin as well. This might be the farthest method of investing in Bitcoin. These companies profit from trading fees as people buy and sell cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. But there is a correlation because trading activity increases when Bitcoin's price goes up. That's how you basically make money by investing in a cryptocurrency exchange. But there are not a lot of cryptocurrency exchanges that are publicly traded right now. Coinbase might be the only one, and it is the largest US based exchange with a global reach. You do have some other platforms like Robinhood that partially are involved in cryptocurrencies, but overall they're a trading platform for stocks and crypto. If you look at the pros and cons, first you have revenue growth potential. As crypto adoption grows, so do trading volumes and profits. You have diversified exposure. Exchanges support multiple cryptocurrencies beyond just Bitcoin. On the other hand, regulatory risks always exist. Exchanges face ongoing scrutiny from governments worldwide. And as I mentioned, this is very market sentiment dependent. Profits and stock prices can drop dramatically during crypto winters. So those are 5 different methods that you can use to build up your Bitcoin portfolio. Remember, each method has its own pros and cons, so take your time to research what fits your goals and risk tolerance. And hey, don't forget the golden rule of investing. Never put all your eggs in one basket. You might want to create a Bitcoin portfolio that holds parts of all of these different ways of investing. But before you do any of that, remember what I said earlier in the video. Please spend some time learning about Bitcoin, and then you can start investing. I'll see you next week in a new video. Till then, keep learning and stay on top of your finances. Until next time.